Okay, we are online.
Okay, hello everyone. Today we are glad to have Professor Guillaume Valett to present his work. And, as usual, Professor will have about 1 hour to present his work, and then we open to questions. Professor Silvio Capis will introduce Professor Guillaume Valett, and then he speaks, okay? So thank you, Professor, to be with us today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I'm very happy and very proud to be here today. So it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henrique. Thank you, Guillaume. And I will introduce you, Guillaume, and make the usual joke that I always do when I introduce you. Guillaume is someone who I can call a friend and a co-worker of me. We work like for the past 3 to 4 years, like.
Yes.
Yeah, Guillaume. So Guillaume, let me find his bio here. So Professor Guillaume Valett is Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Grenoble Alpes, France, and also Research Fellow at the Centre de Research en Économie de Grenoble Research Center. Sorry for my bad French, Guillaume.
No.
And Associate
Excellent.
Researcher at the Institute of Sociological Research in Geneva, Switzerland. And here comes the joke. He holds 2 PhDs because one is not enough for him. One in economics at the University Pierre Mendes, France, and the other in sociology at the University of Geneva, Switzerland, at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales. In his research, he studies monetary economics, the political economy of gender, and the history of economic thought during the Progressive Era. He has published in several distinguished academic journals, such as Revue d'Économie Politique and Economy and Society, especially on the work of Albion Small. And he has been invited to give talks by prestigious institutions, such as the New School for Social Research in New York, the Bank of Ecuador, the Bank of Hungary, the Bank of Israel, the Swiss National Bank, and the United Nations in Geneva. He was awarded the Fulbright Grant in 2021. So Guy, please, it's up to you, and thanks again for accepting to join us today.
Thank you very much, Silvio, for your kind words. Even though you have forgotten, I have been started a 3rd PhD dissertation in chemistry. No, it's a joke. It's another joke. No, more seriously, I would like to thank Silvio and all the organizers of this event. For me, it's a real pleasure to be here with you tonight for me, and it's a great opportunity for me to present my work. So I am very, very happy and very proud to be here with you today. As the title of my presentation indicates, I am going to present you my research, both in economics and in sociology. Sometimes this research overlaps, and this is, of course, in line with what Silvio said about my background, because I hold 2 PhDs, one in economics and one in sociology. And this is just to say and to express my love for these 2 social sciences, because in my studies and in my research, I think I have still been impressed by either economics, who did some sociological studies, such as Joseph Schumpeter, for instance. And likewise, I have always liked sociologists who were or who are still interested in economics. I have Émile Durkheim in mind, Max Weber, and also Albion Small, one of the authors in social sciences I am working on, and I'm going to say more words on him later on. So today I will try to say some words about the usefulness, about the advantages of this kind of cross-disciplinary research. And of course, I will also talk about the limitations of this work. And this is why I'm going to follow this outline. First, I will give you a kind of overview of my pluridisciplinary approach, stressing some facts about my own career, about my background, of course, about my methodology. This will be the first section of my presentation. In the second section of my presentation, I will try to present you a kind of a reflexive insight, emphasizing the advantages and the limitations, maybe the drawbacks of my approach, because as I will say, it's never easy to try to gather two social sciences. Sometimes you never know where you are. Sometimes it's difficult to know exactly whose side you are on. So there are also some limitations, of course, and maybe this will open the debate for the discussion. Because in the third section, I will draw some concluding remarks, inviting people to think about their own position and stance among the discipline. And this will, once again, I think, open the debate. So let's start maybe with the overview of my pluridisciplinary approach. As I have explained before, I can repeat that my academic career has been characterized so far by a pluridisciplinary approach. Of course, I did my PhD in economics and in sociology, but I read a lot of papers and books, both from sociologists and economists, also from historians sometimes. And I think that I was, from the onset of my career, I had been very interested in trying to overlapping disciplines, trying to know more about the origins and the roots of social sciences, because in my own studies, there was a kind of lack in the sense that, well, for instance, when I studied the history of economic thought, nobody told me about the period during which there was a kind of unity of social sciences, particularly with the influence of the German historical school. And I have discovered this very recently, and to me, it was a kind of a revelation. I told to myself, wow, this is something which was lacking in my own background, and this is why I decided to know more about the connections between the disciplines within social sciences, and also the connections between the researchers themselves. And as I will explain more later on, it was a discovery to read that there were some connections between European economists and American economists. For instance, just before the First World War, it was also the same with researchers coming from Europe or the US with the rest of the world. I have edited recently a book entitled Inequalities and the Progressive Era. And in this book, some contributors emphasize the fact that there were many connections between scholars all over the world in economics and in sociology before the First World War. So to me, it was very interesting. And this stance nourishes me, nurtures me in the sense that it brings to me new insights of on economic and social phenomena. This stance also brought me some advantages regarding the use of several methods in social sciences. I have done some empirical work, so using econometrics, for instance, but I have also done some works resting on qualitative methods. And to me, this was the outcome of my cross-disciplinary research and my stance in social sciences. So to me, it has been a force since the onset of my career, and this is something I try to put forth in my own research today. And specifically, if I can say some words on this, I think I have always been influenced by the French regulation theory. I don't know if you are aware of it, but here you can have a picture with me and Michel Alieta, who is one of the main representatives of the French branch of the regulation theory. And I have to say that historically there's always been a branch of the regulation theory in Grenoble, where I am teaching today. So when I was a student, many of my professors learned us economics through the lens of regulation theory. And I think I have been, yes, influenced by this theory until now. I'm not going to explain today this theory, but I can say that it's an approach trying to explain the origin and the reproduction of the different forms of capitalism over history, or at a precise moment of the history. And specifically, this approach tries to explain the emergence and the regulation of crises. And the authors belonging to this theory are specialized in particular on monetary issues. And I think this has always been very useful to me, because these economists try to gather economics, but also sociology, but also history, in order to understand the dynamics of crises and the possibility of regulation of capitalism, as I have said just previously. So I think I owe many things to the regulation theory, especially with respect to my research on monetary issue. And to me, before turning to my topics of research, you will see you will understand the extent to which the regulation theory has been critical to my own perspective. I think with my cross-disciplinary research, I try to have a kind of specific political economy approach. This approach consists of giving some strength of relations of power, and on the idea of the embeddedness of economic phenomena in the dynamics of society. I think this is very important, because I don't consider that the model of Homo economicus, for instance, is valid, because this is a fictive model. This is a model of laboratory that does not exist in reality. to me, by contrast, it's important to understand that economic phenomena are always related to relations of power taking place in a given society, in a given historical context, and we cannot stress or bring out the emergence or the existence, sorry, of a unique law of human behaviors. It's always important to rely on on culture, on the historical context, and this is very useful to understand the economic processes such as growth, economic growth, or development, for instance. And to me, this is a great lesson coming from the regulation theory. And to that aim, I think to me the economic knowledge is the more important in my approach. But this fact does not prevent me from using the knowledge coming from other social sciences. And this is why this is a kind of knowledge in economics which is opened to sociology on the one end and to history on the other end. Of course, as I have explained just now, there is a kind of hierarchy to me between this knowledge. Economics come first, and after I rest on knowledge coming from sociology and history. This is my political economy approach, which is in line to me with my will to explain the existence of the relations of power and the will to embed the economic phenomena in the reality of society. And with this in mind, I think it's that time is ripe now to explain my different fields of study that Silvio already explained or gave some words on each of them before. But I'm going to, of course, to spend more time on each of them. And before explaining each of them, I just want to remind you that the common point of these fields of study is that I try to stress the role of institutions in the decision of individuals or of the decisions coming from the policy makers. To me, it's important to rest on the idea that institutions influence people in their everyday life and in their economic decision. And of course, symmetrically, people are able to transform institutions, which are, if I quote Douglas North, the Nobel laureate in 1993, institutions are the rules of the game. So it's important to have this in mind to understand my stance, my credo in economics. So if I try to explain and to say more words on each area of research. And Silvio started saying that I have been studying monetary issues, and he's right, because I did my PhD in economics on the relations between the Swiss franc and the euro, and trying to understand the possibility for Switzerland to be outside of the European Union, because maybe you know that Switzerland is not a full member of the EU, but the country is close to the EU because Switzerland is geographically at the core of Europe and needs to have ties with the European Union. And this situation that I call integration without adhesion or without full membership entails some consequences on the Swiss franc euro exchange rate. And this is particularly the case because the Swiss franc plays the role of the safe haven currency, meaning that in case of turmoil, of international turmoil, and this is the case now, there is a flight to safety coming from international investors who want some assets denominated in Swiss franc, and this entails an appreciation of the Swiss franc. Of course, Switzerland has a strong economy, and its exports are based on high value-added products. But there are also some thresholds in the appreciation that can be harmful for Switzerland because of deflation, because of competitiveness, of course. And this has been, and this is still the case today, this has been a great part of my research, trying to capture, to understand the advantages and the limitations of the Swiss stance, political stance towards European integration. Of course, focusing on that issue, this led me to understand and to know more about the Swiss monetary policy, to know more about the functioning of the Swiss National Bank, for instance, and also to know more about the history of money at large in Switzerland. And with this in mind, this is why I turned to the analysis of local currencies in Switzerland. And I discovered that in Switzerland, there has been a local currency that has been circulating for more than 80 years in Switzerland, which is called the Wir, which means us, we, in English. And this local currency was created during the Great Depression in order to foster trade between small businesses, in order to create a social bond between some Swiss entrepreneurs, and also to ease the access for banking credit at a time in which banking financing was very scarce, and in a time characterized by deflation. And here in the right top of my slide, you can see the picture. Sorry, it's not of good quality, but we can guess and see it, the characters. We can see two men on the left. This is Paul Zimmermann, one of the creator of the local currency, the Wir. And on the right, this is the economist Silvio Gesell. Maybe you know him, for some of you, because he designed the idea of and the principle of melting money. The more you get a money, the higher you will be taxed on the holding this money, because the idea of Gesell was that people must spend their money in order to foster production, in order to accelerate the trade and the circulation of goods, and in order to discourage savings. So this idea was very popular in the circle of economists at the time. Keynes, for instance, read Gesell and appreciated his work. Keynes was skeptical about the possibility to use Gesell's framework on a large scale, but he paid a tribute to his work nevertheless. And on the other end, this is the funny story, but Gesell's work was also appreciated by Hayek, for instance, because to Hayek, the idea of Gesell's were a good opportunity to to break the monopoly central banks had over the use of currency on a given territory through fiat money, and to Hayek, the use and the spread of local currencies was a good way to promote competition between currencies. This is what he wrote in his book. Maybe you know it, I don't know, the denationalization of money. Yes, he was also really interested in Gesell's idea. So in my own research, I didn't turn on my research on the VIR, I didn't turn specifically to Gesell's ideas, but I tried to understand the idea of monetary circuit between using the case of the VIR. I tried to question the frontiers of money. This is very important, with the two axes in mind, what I called the economic force on the one end and the social force on the other end. When you balance these two forces, you will find the frontier of money. And to me, the frontier of money, with respect to this balance, is always the result of a political conflict, is always the result of a, when I say political conflict, I don't mean war, I mean discussions, I mean debates, but it's a political choice, and it should be a political choice at the end, in my view. So this was a summary of my research on monetary issues related to Switzerland. And today, and I will finish my presentation on this advertising. Silvio is already aware of that, but in relation to the Swiss case in particular, I tried to question the idea of social responsibility for central banks, because, as you may know, central banks today have been called, and sometimes the calls came from themselves, from the staff and from economists working within the central banks, to enlarge their missions, because there are new concerns regarding environment, regarding inequalities sometimes. And this is why I decided to know more about the possibility for central banks to be involved in a kind of social responsibility, moving from the independence framework to this new social responsibility framework. My second field of study is related to the history of economic thought. I have already said some words on this. There was a kind of sneak peek on this at the beginning of my presentation, and I'm going to maybe to explain more what this period is and who are these economists and sometimes sociologists related to this period. And the progressive era covers a period going from 1890s to the beginning of 1920s. As its name indicates, it's a period of progress, because at the time, and this I have forgotten to mention, that the progressive era relates to the American case mostly, because at the time, both the economy and society of the USA faced deep upheavals. It was a period characterized by deep transformations, and I can say that these transformations can be summarized characterized by three features. First, industrialization. After the Civil War, it was the time of reconstruction for the US, and it was also the time of the takeoff of the US, and this takeoff was characterized by great opportunities, but also by deep inequalities between people, with the growing role of big businesses such as today. And so this is why there is we can make sometimes a comparison between the two periods. And yes, this is the first feature of the period industrialization. The second feature deals with immigration. There were very big waves of immigration at the time to the US, and these waves transformed for good the US, challenging the idea of the American nation, or what was the American nation, how to build a strong nation, both from an internal perspective and also from an external perspective. We have to bear in mind that it was also the time for the US for a kind of colonization. And it was the case, for instance, in South America. The US at the time wanted to have its place in Central America, but also in South America, because the political American authorities were already aware of the potential of having this kind of influence over around its territory. It was the time of the Monroe Doctrine, for instance. So it was very important. And I have forgotten to say that the third feature is urbanization. Many people moved from campaign to cities, and once again, this changed many things regarding the social bonds, regarding the economy of the time, and many people called for a new order. It was a time for a new order. We had American people had to think a new order in order to strive and even to survive as a nation. Against this backdrop, this was also the time of the institutionalization of social sciences. And at the time, there were very few social scientists, social sciences researchers in the US, because there were a few universities. The country was lacking of resources and so on. So many young people at the time went to Germany to do their studies in economics or in sociology, because Germany was perceived at the right place to be, because of the legitimacy of its professors. I have talked about Max Weber, for instance. It was more at the end of the period of the progressive era, but there were also influential economists such as Gustav Schmoller, Adolf Wagner, for instance, who were very influential in Germany, of course, who advised the chancelier. I have forgotten his name. Bismarck. Yes. So they were very powerful, influential, and many young Americans went to Germany to study. And when they came back to the US at the beginning of the 80s, they wanted to do the same in the US. They had in mind what their German mentors taught them. And German mentors, this was a specific feature in economics. The economists of the German historical school advised for an economist to know, of course, the economic knowledge, but also to turn to other social sciences. Likewise, they always stress that it was important for a researcher to rest on certain morals. We have to consider ethics when we do some research, and this is, of course, the case for the object you are studying, but it is also the case for you as a researcher. You always have to wonder about the usefulness of your research, about the ethics underpinning your research. And when these American students came back to the US, they wanted to create a new social science devoted to the improvement of the American society. They wanted to promote economics or sociology connected to morals. This is what they had in mind, and this is what they they did when they created the American Economic Association in 1885. If you have a look at the status of the association, of the original status of the association, you will find this attachment to morals, and you will also find the will of the original wills of these economists to improve the American society. So to them, economics should not be a part of the world. By contrast, it should be embedded in the reality of the American society. And among these reformers was Albion Small, who is portrayed here on the left, at the middle of my slide. He was trained in political economy in Germany. He did his PhD in history at Johns Hopkins. And he was the first head of the first department of sociology in the world, which was created in Chicago in 1892, and he created the American Journal of Sociology. So at the time, he was really influential. He was close to economics, and he was also close to economists because he participated in many conferences. He published in the Journal of Political Economy, for instance, at the time. He was close to influential economists such as Richard T. Ely, one of the pioneers in labor economics. And my work on him consisted in discovering the originality of his thought. So I discovered that he tried to find a new types of organization in companies in order to prevent social conflicts from arising, but also in order to promote the collective use of capital. Because these authors who came back from Germany, I repeat, were opposed both to communism. They didn't like the use of Marxist ideas. They paid the tribute to Marx, but they didn't like people using their ideas for political reasons. They didn't. The small called, for instance, Lenin, social agitator, for instance. So he was not in line with Lenin. And on the other hand, these authors were opposed to liberalism, were opposed to a free market society, because this free market society was at the roots of great inequalities, and they didn't want that. They wanted a new society in which the state will be entrusted the ability to conduct new types of social and economic policies in order to regulate the dynamics of society. So before Keynes, they had in mind the idea and the usefulness of social and economic policies of a new kind. And I think they are the fathers of the public policies that have been that were implemented during the New Deal 30 or 40 years later. At the same time, there were also some writers or intellectuals who were gravitating around scholars that did not have some diplomas, but they were interested in economic ideas, sociological ideas, and it was not the same situation than today. It was quite easy for intellectuals or some writers to have connections with some scholars at the university. And it was the case of the woman at the right of the slide in the middle. Her name is Charlotte Perkins Gilman. She was a novelist, she was a writer, she was a kind of feminist. I say a kind of because she didn't like the term feminism. She self-labeled humanist instead, because she wrote some very interesting things on the economic situation of women. But as she said herself, her intention was not only to improve women's conditions, her intention was to improve the global dynamics of society for the benefit of everybody. So to her, improving women's conditions was also men's matter, because we are the same part of the same society, and it's important to devise together new ways of functioning, and new rules for the benefit of all. And she wrote a very interesting books entitled Women and Economics in 1898, trying to give some new possibilities of the economic organization, both within the household, within the home, and also at the exterior, outside of the home, because it was, as I said, it was the time progressive era. It was the time of progress. This was also the time of utopia, and of course, some ideas sometimes were very in the clouds of society, but there were also good ideas and new possibilities which were imagined. And Gilman had the idea to outsource some economic activities that were realized within the home so far to big companies. With the larger scale, the costs will be lower and people will be able to do other things, especially women, to do other things than staying home. And this will improve the global functioning of society, because both parents, for instance, will have more time to spend with their children, will have more time to spend with their friends. Of course, today everybody can say that, but at the time it was new, because she advised for the creation of collective kitchen, of collective kindergarten, and it was very new. And this is why I'm interested in her idea, in order to know more about, yes, the origins of home economics in the US, and also to know more about the complexity of economic relations taking place within the home, but also outside the home. And my research on Gilman, of course, deals with a kind of political economy of gender. So it's true. But when I have started studying my third line of inquiry, I tried to know more about the status and the role of women within a central bank. As you know, central banks, which are powerful institutions, are a man's world. There are very few women who are head of these institutions, or who occupy a very top position within the organization of these institutions. I have put here a picture of Christine Lagarde, but there are very few women, and it's complicated for women to access to these institutions of power. This is the first obstacle, and my research indicated that there is a second obstacle for them when they are within the institution. So when they have accessed these institutions of power, they face a second obstacle or problem, which is a problem of authority. Or the authority is legitimate power, and it's never easy for them to appear as legitimate as men in this world. And this was my work on that field. I tried to know more about this, and I will conclude regarding the political economy of gender about I can say a new topic regarding economics for me, but a topic which is in line with my research in economics, in sociology, of course. So it's related to the picture of Silvio on the beach of Porto Alegre. It's a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you know him, the very famous bodybuilder and the very famous actor, who is posing here with his muscles. And I did my PhD in sociology on the gender, the meaning of the practice of bodybuilding. And after many research on that topic, I told to myself that it could be useful to know more about the economics or the political economy of bodybuilding in order to understand the way that the body is also a kind of mirror of the system in which we are living in. And this is why I tried to investigate this issue first using the case of bodybuilding, but after that, trying to broaden the perspective and to question, yes, the idea of the political economy of body. And to that aim, and this is an example, I have many researches on the back burner, but this is an example to illustrating what I am saying, because I think it could be very interesting to use the framework of the regulation theory, which I am very close to understand more about the political economy of body. Because just to explain very fast, but I told you that for the regulation theory, it's important to understand the different mechanism of underpinning the dynamics of capitalism. It's important to know more about the origins and the regulation of crises within capitalism. And to that aim, regulation theories authors use what they call 5 institutional forms. These five institutional forms, which overlap in reality, explain the extent to which a regime, a system is sustainable or not. There is a state, there is a currency, there is what they call international relations, inter-firm competition, and wage relations. And when these 5 institutional forms, which are in blue here, function all together, then there is a possibility for a certain type of capitalism to move on and to be regulated. When there is a crisis, there is a dysfunction of at least one of them. And I told to me that maybe we have to add a 6th institutional form to this theory that could be the gender perspective, because gender explains some relations of power. The gender organization of society is also at the bottom, at the basis of the capital accumulation, especially through the connection between home economics and the outside of of economics. And to me, through this 6th institutional form, I will be able, at least from a theoretical perspective, but I will be able to know more about what I call the political economy of the body. So this is an example of future research I would like to conduct. So if I turn now to my second section, the second part of my presentation, namely the advantages and the limitations of my approach. Using Max Weber's concept, I can say that this approach offers real perspectives which are linked to a kind of ethics of conviction. Ethics of conviction is a kind of ethics which is very stable, which doesn't change over time. And I think this is something I have learned to try to follow in my own research. Don't do what you expect other people to do. Just do what you want to do. This is the way you will be legitimate. This is the way you will be reliable when you are going to explain what you are doing. Of course, it's difficult for heterodox economists because we know that the main institutions, the main journals are between the hands of orthodox people. But there are also an economic reality, and the economic reality of these last years show us that these people were wrong, and some people coming from this community are now interested in more heterodox ideas And this is why, this is my advice, you have to follow and to frame your own ethics of conviction. My ethics of conviction was to conduct cross-disciplinary research in line with my conception of heterodoxy, as I have explained. And I have tried to forge some concepts using this stance. I have told you about the concept of integration without adhesion, for instance, for Switzerland, but I have also tried to use the concept of career in order to understand the way people evolve over time, and the way people use these the different trajectories of life in order to behave in society. This is something I am using for the political economy of body, for instance. I have also forged the concept of attitude, which is not a behavior. Behavior is just, to me, an individual behavior. By contrast, attitude is a socially oriented behavior. And I used this framework when I worked on the Swiss banking, especially on Swiss banks such as the VR Bank, which is a bank issuing money with the consequences of its actions regarding the community of users. And I think this makes a big difference. And of course, I think my approach helped me to manage more easily, in a more secure way, the different methods in economics. I am not an expert in quantitative methods, of course, but I know how to use them sometimes. I did some economic tricks, and I still do. But I also like doing some qualitative research because it really depends on your topic. Yes, I think we don't have to get rid of qualitative methods in economics just by principle. Depending on your topic, depending on your stance, you can use these methods. And I think there is a room for this type of research, because when you start your career, you always people always say, oh, you have to publish, I don't know, in the American Economic Review. If you don't do this, you are nobody. You have to focus on this. And this is what I didn't do that. I found other journals, very top leading journals, who try to follow a completely different approach. I am just mentioning here some of them: Economy and Society, Socio-Economic Review of Political Economy. These reviews are very interesting. I like their topics. I like their editorial lines, and to me, you can publish in these journals, but you have, of course, to frame first your own ethics of conviction. But of course, there are some limitations of that, because, as I have already mentioned, there is a kind of a pressure coming from the community of economists to publish in this review, to go to these conferences and not to others, and so on. And I totally agree with Amartya Sen, who condemned the historical trend of specialization of sciences, including economics, and above all, condemning its consequences, because Amartya Sen says that an economist should follow two conceptions. First, what he calls the mechanistic conception. An economist, especially using econometrics or quantitative methods, should be able to measure things. And it's very important in order to bring the proof to what you are saying. And this is the mechanistic conception. But Amartya Sen says we have forgotten that there is also an ethical conception for economists. They should devise new principles of living. They should be able to understand that an economic phenomenon is always related to a cultural context, to a given society. And this is what we have forgotten over time. And today we have very good engineers, we can say that, in economics, but we have not great intellectuals. I have already heard in conferences or in presentations, people, economists who are able to say, okay, I can measure the relation between A and B. And I ask the question, but what does it mean? I don't know. I really don't know. There is, yes, a causality between A and B, but this is just what I am able to say. And I think it's not enough. And I totally agree with Sen. And I think it's not easy, but trying to be aware, trying to be open to other social sciences can help you to become, to frame a better ethical conception. Of course, my second limitation is that pluridisciplinarity is not easy to value in academic careers, because people are going to address you the issue, whose side are you on? Are you an economist or a sociologist? If you are an economist, you have to talk as an economist. This is you are the product of an history, a particular history, and sociology or history or philosophy is completely different. You have to choose. So there is a kind of paradox, because on the one hand, we can hear, for instance, here in France, some recommendations, some incentives from institutions to conduct pluridisciplinary research, but in careers, it's not really valued. So it's sometimes difficult to do so. And finally, I want to stress that pluridisciplinarity is a good thing, but it's never easy to undertake, in reality. Because sometimes you are going to work with other scholars from other disciplines who don't use the same concepts, who don't use the same, who don't refer to the same mechanisms, and it could be very difficult for you to understand what they want to say, because they won't have the same insight and the same perspective than you on some topics. I have in mind the explanation of monetary phenomena, for instance. And to me, it has been quite easy, because I am not schizophrenic. So I am talking, when I take my economist side, I can talk to my sociologist side. So I can try to connect the two sides and to find a solution. But when you are involved in a cross-disciplinary project and you are going to talk with researchers coming from other disciplines, sometimes it's difficult for you to understand you as a scientist. So you have to have this in mind when you plan to conduct this type of research. So to conclude, now, of course, it's never easy to know what the future of economics and social sciences by extension holds. And through my presentation and my own history in academics, I tried to give you the advantages and the limitations of cross-disciplinary research. And I think it's important to bear in mind that first, pluralistic approaches in social sciences are not new. So you are not forced to do this, but you can. If this corresponds to your own ethics of research, if you are interested in mixing social sciences, you can. You will find a way to do this, because you will be reliable thanks to your ethics of conviction. So yes, you can. And on the other hand, this addresses very important issues regarding the use of cross-disciplinary research from economists. Sorry, I've made a mistake. It's pluridisciplinarity. What now? If I rest on the French case, but some of the authors who are mentioned here, maybe you know some of them, we have several conceptions. Some authors, such as André Orléans, who works on money, is very interested in the use of the openness of economics to other social sciences, because to him is the good way to gather and even to merge all the social sciences and to create a unique social science, because he really believes, Orléans really believes in the unity of social sciences. And time is ripe to him to get rid of the separation of disciplines and to merge them. But we have another perspective coming from Jean Tirole, the Nobel Prize. To him, it's also really important for economists to turn to other social sciences. But in his view, it's not to create a new social science, is to reinforce orthodox economics. For instance, he works on models trying to model the human behaviors or the behaviors of companies on a given market. And he said that he has said in recent papers or in a book that when you turn to sociology or to psychology, you are going to borrow some of their models, and from this you are going to improve the dynamics of orthodox models. And it's very important to him to borrow from other sciences. So it's a completely different use of social sciences than André Orléans. You also have other researchers, such as Esther Duflo, who has been crowned with the Nobel Prize also very recently, who defends a totally different approach. She doesn't believe in the Homo economicus model, for instance, and she's also aware and interested in the use of other social sciences. But to her, it's only to do empirical research. Only empirical economics should matter. You should forget about theoretical economics. What is not useful regarding an empirical perspective, what it's not used, what is not possible to test and to conduct an empirical research through experiments. It's not economics for Duflo. So it's a more restrictive approach, and of course she's interested in the use of social sciences, but it's just to do empirical research. And to me, it's interesting maybe, but it also could be dangerous, because I think a scientific discipline is not only about experiments, it's also about its history, it's also about theory, it's also about modeling with abstraction. I think it's very important, because what we are going today may not have a direct use today, but it could be very useful in the future. And we have many examples in the history of sciences. And I borrow here a new word coined by my colleague in sociology of sport, philosophy of sport, Bernard Andrieux, who is in favor of doing indisciplinarity, in the sense that do what you want to do, you can mix what you want, just follow your own path and you will see what's going to happen. But we have to get rid of these barriers, of all these frontiers between discipline. And yes, my only advice to you, if there are some young students here, is to try to build your own ethics of conviction, to try to find your own path, and to believe in it. I think this is what is the most important thing. And to me, this has been very useful to publish very interesting publications. Of course, I have given you here some publications, recent publications of my research. These publications rest on my cross-disciplinary approach, either on the social responsibility of central banks, or of the trajectories of outstanding progressives of the progressive during the progressive era, or also about the issue of the formation of price regarding the neglected thought of Albion Small. And of course, I turn to the very famous series which will be published on central banking. I'm very proud to have worked with distinguished scholars such as Louis-Philippe Rochon and Silvio, who is here today. It has been a fantastic experience, and in order to publish these volumes, we have contacted many authors, including authors coming from other social sciences sometimes. And I think this is the evidence of the possibility to exist as a scholar using a cross-disciplinary approach. Thank you very much. I hope I have not do a mistake in writing obrigado today. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a real pleasure. And of course, I am open to your questions.
Thank you, Guillaume. And thank you for the obrigado. It's quite good for us to see this.
Great.
And what an impressive amount of work you're doing. And it's a huge interdisciplinary approach. And you go from monetary issues in Switzerland and central banking to gender and political economy of the body and the progressive era. So we can see that the pluridisciplinary approach, it can go in many ways. But I found really fascinating your insight on the political economy of the body. Because I like to read some history books also. I think this helps a lot for us in economics. And there is always like examples, like in ancient China, it was a signal of the monarchy to have long nails, because this was a signal that they didn't have to work on the fields, on the crops. And in Europe, the monarchy used all those extravagant clothes to signal their higher status. And today, maybe we can say the same of the bodybuilders and so on, because it takes a lot of time to train and a lot of money to buy all the food and the supplements to build such a body. And we can understand that today. And I never talked about that, but you just opened my mind to that. It's quite a great insight.
Thank you very much for your kind words and your comments. And if I have a reaction to this, yes, the example of the bodybuilding to me is very illustrative, because it embodies and it's also a vehicle of capitalism to some extent, the idea to accumulate, to push away the boundaries, to value and to have a kind of worship of private property. This is your own body. You can do what you want with it, and you have to show off. You have to be better than the others, thanks to your body. I think thinking about the political economy of bodybuilding is a good way to think about our model of growth and development, because a bodybuilder eats a lot of calories each day, every day. This is very important, and this is also why I think today we are turning to a new capitalism, which I call the capitalism of vulnerabilities. And in this capitalism of vulnerabilities, I think the body of bodybuilders are not very useful because they are too big, and we are turning to new ways of improving the body with, of course, new food, but also new types of exercise. Physical exercise. And to me, this is why disciplines such as CrossFit, such as fitness are so popular today, because it's a good way to build a very flexible body, as if you have to be prepared for something, a catastrophe or a fight, or I don't know. I think, yes, through the body, you have a good insight of the economic system you are living in.
And it's crazy how the world today is highly integrated, right? Because you in France is talking about CrossFit, and we here in Brazil, we completely understand that, because we have CrossFits all around. I have 2 quarters from that side and another one back here. So in this small area in which I live, I have 2 CrossFit training centers, and one training of Krav Maga, that fighting from Israeli forces, and another of Muay Thai, which came from Thailand. And so it's quite crazy how integrated we are.
And you have also a great tradition in Jiu-Jitsu, and
it was great.
And we are turning to your sport today in France or in Europe. We are very interested in this sport.
Yeah, great. So Alessandro, I think you might have some questions that came from YouTube.
Well, thank you, Professor Valett. A very thoughtful talk. I have 2 points that I want to share with you. The first is when we were talking about the Duflo approach, I remember Lord Kelvin telling us in the late of 19th century that there's nothing more to discover in physics, just better measurement. And it's amazed me always how these perspectives of some orthodox economics echoes the approaches of the classical physics before the relativity theory. It's the same approach that denies the necessity of more theory research. The theory it's given, and there's nothing more to discover. Just measure more. It's very interesting for me to make this relationship. And the other point that I want to ask, this is a question for you, Professor. You were talking about progressive era, and how did I want to ask you if you, in your research, in your studies about this specific period in the United States, did you investigate something about African American intellectuals? When you are talking, I was remembering W.E.B. Du Bois. It's a great African American intellectual from the period, and also Booker T. Washington, and both the African Americans lived that period. That's a very transitional period after the Reconstruction and before the Harlem Renaissance and the building NAACP and afterward the civil rights movement. But W. Du Bois studied with Schmoller, studied with Adolf Wagner in Berlin, and it seems to me that there's this kind of progressive era of the mainstream thought in American society in the beginning of 20th century. But there's this characteristic of the African Americans that are building some kind of knowledge and some kind of scientific approach about this kind of unequal society that they're living at the time. And it seems to me that this maybe makes this period more complex, because there's a group subject to racism, subject to oppression, and there's this perspective, this kind of perspective allowed this group to develop a different perspective of social thinking, more directed for the social reality they are living at the time. So do you think that do you have some more thoughts to add about this perspective of this complexity of the social structure of America at the time, and especially when we bring to the picture the African American groups?
Thank you very much for your very interesting questions. Regarding the first one, I totally agree with you. This reminds you, Duflo's stance reminds other thinkers of previous times, stressing that there is nothing new to be discovered, and everything has already been done, and we have to if we want to discover new things, we have only to focus on experiments or empirical studies, and Duflo is in line with this. And personally, I don't agree with her, because it's a kind of reductionism to me for knowledge. You don't have to decide of the borders of scientific knowledge before starting your research. You will see after your research. This is a big difference with me. And regarding the other questions, the second question, likewise, I totally agree with you, because the case of Du Bois is very illustrative of this two-sided era, because when I talked about the progressives during this period, of course, I was mainly referring to white men trying to understand the American society and who had the main positions. And Du Bois, who, as you're right, who did his studies in Germany, was of course an outstanding person, but he was a part of the process in the sense that he was not fully integrated in the dynamics of the ideas of progress, because although he had very interesting ideas, his ideas were not really praised by the scientific community, who, as I said, whose member talked first for white male people in the American society. And unfortunately, we have discovered the Du Bois's ideas later, while they were very interesting. And Du Bois' case is really illustrative of, yes, the ambiguous characteristics of this period, and which also relates to debates such as eugenics, also, for instance, such as birth control, of course, or referring to the treatment of Black people. Many progressives were in favor, for instance, on the law on discrimination in the South, because to them it was a good way to protect Black people, in order for them to give more time to catch up what they said with white people. So yes, I totally agree with you. We should rediscover Du Bois' thought, and this is why in the book I mentioned there is a chapter, a very interesting chapter written by Stephen Pressman on it. And yes, he has been forgotten, unfortunately, but it's a mistake. And we should know more about these Black people, indigenous people, some women also who wrote very interesting things about the American society and who have been forgotten. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
So do we have any questions in the YouTube chat?
No, nothing. No.
We also don't have any other questions here at the Zoom. So shall we wait like one more minute if someone writes?
But I will take the opportunity and make another question for Professor Valett. It's a very, very instigating talk that he gives to us. Professor Valett, when you're talking about the regular theory of regulation and the gender aspect, I believe that you agree that we can do the same perspective with the racial element, right? When you in the slide you show this several elements actuating under this gender point, but the same we can think the same about the racial perspective. There's also a racial body we can think that is subject to some kind of perspectives and controls. I'm asking this because in Brazil, for us, it's a very, very important point, and a very problematic society in respect of the racial problems that we have in Brazil of prejudice and racism. So I believe that you can. This aspect for us, we can talk also that maybe there's a intersection between gender race. And this is give us a lot of complexity for our for this perspective, because we can have a male African, a male black man, a male black, a female white. We have some different perspectives in this. It's possible extended this perspective to include and make more intersectional perspective of in this approach.
Yes, I once again I totally agree with you. I focused on gender, not to say that everything is about gender, but just to stress that since I am interested in this perspective, I think it is the more useful to turn to the political economy of body. But having said that, I totally agree with you in the sense that when you deal with gender, you are forced, and it's a good thing, to turn to analyze intersectionality. And one very good example of this intersectional approach is to take into account race as a very important feature of the understanding of economic and social relations. But in some, what is very important for the regulation theory approach is to take into account the relations of power. And in both cases, I think you can do this through gender or race. After that, it's just a question of balance. Some research turn more to gender and others to race. But in both cases, because there are some intersectional processes, you are going to deal with the two of them, and this is the most important. For me, I don't forget this. I totally agree with you. It's just that since I wanted to turn to the political economy of body, I thought that it could be more useful to stress first the idea of gender, but I don't forget, of course, the issue of race. You are totally right.
Well, I would like also to enjoy this time and make another question to Guillaume, but I would change the subject. And since Guillaume talks about a lot of things and he's an expert of so many things, I would change the subject, and I'm still in your field of study. I've got really curious about the VIR, the Swiss local currency. And could you talk a little bit more about that, how it works? Is it convertible to Swiss franc or not? How is the currency backed by like some Swiss francs savings in some place? Could you explain a little bit more how it works?
Yes, of course. So this is a local currency which originated in 1936, and it is issued by a bank whose name is the VIR Bank. And since this date, the number of participants of this monetary circuit has slightly increased because there were only 900 participants in 1945, if I'm not wrong, almost. And today there are more than 30,000 small businesses in Switzerland, which is the first network of small businesses in Switzerland using the VIR. The idea of the VIR is to rest on Gesel's ideas, especially through two features. First, melting money, and the second, to the loans with very low interest rates. Regarding melting money, at the beginning of the system, there was a kind of tax on each VIR a company held. But it was complicated to supervise and to regulate. So they decided to change the system and to turn to asymmetric convertibility instead. You can change your Swiss franc into VIR, but you cannot do the opposite. So it's a good way to spend your VIR with other companies. And it's true because using the VIR, you are going to buy some things to companies which are not in your sectors, and which with you would have not been in contact otherwise. So it's a good way to promote and to foster trade. And the second feature, which is a very low interest rates, many businesses using the VIR borrow money and credits in VIR from the VIR bank, and then they're able to invest in their sector. And this is very useful, and it is particularly useful in times of a crisis, because if they have problems to get some Swiss francs, they are able to have a VIR instead. Of course, if there is a very big crisis in Switzerland, there will be the crisis, but we can say that it's a kind of a good way to smooth the consequences of economic and financial crisis. And it's true, because remember this famous quote from Minsky, everybody can create money. It's other things to the problem lies in getting it accepted. And in the case of VIR, since it has been in existence for more than 80 years, his case is very interesting because it is still accepted and it still circulates in Switzerland. So my focus was to try to understand, of course, the dynamics of the VIR, but also to see the articulation and the connection between the VIR system and the Swiss franc system. And to me, this is my conclusion. I think the VIR can exist first and foremost because the Swiss franc system is strong. Of course, if you use this system in another country, there could be a usefulness of this kind of system. And it had always been done in Italy, for instance, or in other places, but it is strong because the Swiss franc system is strong and not the opposite. To me, and this is my conclusion.
Thank you, Guy. And in one of the many books we are editing together, there will be some chapters on local currencies, right?
Yes.
The future of money, I think.
Yeah, there will be. I have written a chapter on the VIR.
It's
on the
your
future
chapter.
On the future, but I'm not the only one. On the VIR, I have written a chapter, but there will be also a chapter of a very good specialist, Georgina Gomez, on other currency system. There will be a chapter of Jérôme Blanc, for instance. So yes, it will be interesting.
Great. So from my end, I have many other questions, but then we will go up to midnight for Guillaume.
I have to go to discotheque now.
Yeah. So Alessandro, anything else, or shall we?
Well, I think we can
close.
I don't know what time is at Switzerland now, and
it's 5 hours ahead of us.
10:30 p.m.
I think we can thank Valett and don't exploit it more.
No, it was and it's still a pleasure. I want to thank you once again. Thank you.
So, do you want to close, Professor Alessandro?
Yes. I think. I will stop the transmission. Okay.
Okay.
So I think for our records, we thank you very much, Guillaume Valett, for being with us this afternoon. I think it was a great talk and a lot of ideas and stimulating perspectives that you bring to us at Porto Alegre, Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you. It was a pleasure.
Feito.